Hello, Virgo. I'm Anna. Thank you very much for joining me today. I hope that you are doing really, really well. And this reading, we will take a look at the awareness for the week, the guidance, the possible outcomes. It hit them, not gradually, all at once, like something they should have known sooner. Something landed in someone tonight, not a thought, a knowing, the specific, irreversible kind that doesn't ask for your permission before it arrives, that doesn't wait for the right moment or the convenient circumstance, that simply appears fully formed, completely certain, slightly devastating in its clarity in the middle of whatever ordinary thing they were doing when it decided to make itself undeniable, and now they are sitting with it in whatever room they occupy, in whatever silence surrounds them, holding something that has changed the weight of everything around it without moving a single thing. Stay here. This one matters. There is a specific kind of realization that arrives too late to be comfortable. Not too late to be true, just too late to be easy. The kind where the truth was always there, waiting at the edges of awareness, tapping quietly and consistently against the glass of whatever was keeping it at a manageable distance, until the glass finally, without warning, simply gave. And everything that had been pressing against it from the outside came flooding in at once, not gently, not gradually, with the full, overwhelming, undiluted force of something that has been waiting a long time to be acknowledged and is done, absolutely done, being patient about it. You are the love of someone's life, and they just figured that out at the most inconvenient possible moment in the most irreversible possible way. I want to be careful with that sentence because it carries weight in both directions, and both directions deserve honesty. On one side, the warmth of it, the specific, almost unbearable tenderness of being someone's finally, of being the answer to a question they've been asking consciously or not for longer than either of you may realize. The particular quality of mattering to someone at that depth in that register with that specific and irreversible certainty, that is real and it is significant and it deserves to land in you without immediately being managed into something smaller. On the other side, the complication of it, because finally is a word that contains a before in which they didn't know, or didn't act on what they knew, or knew and chose distance anyway, or moved through the landscape of your connection without the full awareness of what they were moving through. And that before is not erased by the finally. It exists, it has weight. It may have cost you something: time, certainty, the specific and unrepeatable experience of being chosen before the choosing became obvious rather than after. And that cost is real too. And it deserves acknowledgement that doesn't get swallowed by the warmth of the realization. This reflection invites you to consider, what does it bring up in you, honestly, and without performing the response you think you should have, to sit with the knowledge that someone has arrived finally, fully, completely at the understanding that you are the love of their life, because the response is not always simple. It is not always the uncomplicated rush of warmth that the romantic narrative promises. Sometimes it is complicated by grief for the time that passed before the arriving. Sometimes it is complicated by anger, quiet, legitimate, entirely earned. Sometimes it is complicated by the specific, exhausting ambivalence of a person who wanted this for so long that wanting it became its own kind of protection. And now that it's here, the wanting doesn't automatically convert into the simple, available, ready to receive openness that the moment seems to call for. Because you are not the same person you were when the wanting began. And the realization arriving now into the version of you that exists after everything that happened in the between, that version may have more questions than the earlier one would have had, more requirements, more honest conditions that the warmth of finally doesn't automatically satisfy. Let me tell you what the love of someone's life actually means. Stripped of the romanticism, stripped of the cultural weight the phrase carries, down to what it actually is. It means irreplaceable. It means that every version of a life they can honestly imagine, when examined closely enough, has a shape in it that only one thing fills, and that shape is yours. Not idealized, real. Not the fantasy of you, constructed from selective memory and the softening effect of distance, the actual you, with the full complexity and contradiction and inconvenient reality of what you actually are. That you, in that shape, irreplaceable, in a way that nothing else has managed to be, despite perhaps genuine attempts to find a replacement that would make the original less necessary. Uh, Nothing replaced you. That is what the realization contains. At its most stripped down, most honest core, nothing replaced you. Not for lack of trying, not for lack of options, but because replacement assumes interchangeability and you are not interchangeable, you never were. The specific construction of who you are, the way you think, the way you exist in a room, the way you make the world feel different when you are present in it. That is not something that comes in multiple versions. It is singular, and singularity, once experienced, makes everything that follows it feel slightly approximate, slightly not quite, slightly like a very good attempt at something that cannot actually be replicated. This reflection invites you to consider, what is it about you, not the performed version, not the curated highlights, but the actual lived, completely ordinary, day to day reality of being you that you think has proven impossible to replace? Some of you watching this have been living in a specific and uncomfortable kind of limbo. The limbo of someone who knows in the body, in the gut, in the particular place where truth lives before it becomes articulable, that what exists between them and this person is real, is significant, is not the kind of thing that resolves into ordinary without leaving a mark. But who has been waiting for confirmation, for the other person to catch up, for the realization to arrive on their end with the same clarity it has long since achieved on yours, without any guarantee that the waiting would produce what the waiting was hoping for? That limbo has its own specific weight, its own kind of loneliness. The loneliness of knowing something true about a connection that the other person hasn't yet acknowledged as true, of carrying the full weight of what is real between you while they carry only the portion they've allowed themselves to access. The weight just redistributed. Something shifted in the carrying. And while that shift does not resolve everything, does not automatically close the distance, does not erase the before, does not make the path forward simple or clear or free of the complications that the before created. It changes something fundamental. It changes the landscape of what is possible. It opens a door that was, until the realization arrived, not available to be opened. And what happens at that door, whether you walk toward it, whether you wait, whether you open it or leave it closed, is a decision that belongs entirely, completely, without qualification to you. This reflection invites you to consider, given everything that happened in the before, given the time and the cost and the version of yourself that existed through it, what do you actually want now that the finally has arrived? And does what you want now look the same as what you wanted then? Because people change, both people change. The person experiencing the realization is not the same person who didn't know. And you, the one who has been living in the before, are not the same person who first wanted this. And the connection, if it moves forward between two people who are different from the people who created the original dynamic, which is not necessarily a problem. It may, in fact, be the thing that makes what comes next more real, more honest, more genuinely chosen than what preceded it. But it requires seeing clearly, requires both people to walk in with the full awareness of what was and what is, and what the distance between those two things actually contains. Some of you need to hear something that doesn't get said enough in conversations like this one. The realization on their end is real, and it is also just a realization. It is the beginning of an accountability, not the completion of one. It is the moment of understanding, not the moment of repair. Understanding changes nothing by itself. It is only the prerequisite. What follows the understanding, the action, the honesty, the willingness to do the actual unglamorous, genuinely difficult work of closing the distance that the before created, that is what matters. And whether that work is offered, and whether it is offered in a form that your current self, not your earlier, more available, less complicated self, but the version of you that exists after everything that happened, finds genuine and sufficient and worth the risk of receiving it. That is the only question worth sitting with right now. The power is yours. It always has been. Not to determine what this person does with their realization that belongs to them, and what they do with it will tell you everything you need to know, but the power to decide from the solid and honest ground of everything you have been through what you are willing to receive, what you require, what finally means in the context of your specific history, in the language of your specific needs, for the version of you that is standing here now, changed, informed, no longer the person who would have accepted any form of being chosen simply because the choosing felt like enough. They finally realize you are the love of their life. Not eventually, right now, in this moment, in the full and disorienting and slightly devastating clarity of something that became undeniable when they stopped being able to make it deniable. In the room they are sitting in the ordinary thing they were doing when it arrived uninvited and refused to leave. In the specific, irreversible, completely unmanageable knowing that has changed the weight of their day and will change the shape of what follows it. Trust yourself with this. The realization is theirs. The decision is yours. And those are not the same thing. They were never the same thing. What you do with finally is not determined by the arriving of it. It is determined by who you have become since you first started waiting for it. And that person, the one you are now, after all of it, deserves to choose with full awareness, full honesty, and the complete, unflinching knowledge of exactly what they are worth. Before you go, I want to hear from you in the comments. What does finally feel like when something you have been waiting for arrives later than it should have? Does it feel like relief, or does it feel more complicated than that? And what would you need to see, not hear, not be promised, but actually witness in someone's behavior before you allowed their realization to become something you built anything on? Drop it below. I read every word, and this space holds all of it without judgment or condition. See you in the next one, and listen. Being someone's finally is significant. But being your own first, putting your own clarity, your own needs, your own hard won knowing at the center of whatever comes next, that is the thing that makes finally worth anything at all. Take care.